have my very good friend Jeff Ragovin joining us from what's now Salesforce Buddy Media, but previously just Buddy Media, which is where Jeff and I first got to know each other starting 6 years ago.
Yeah, 2007.
So just for a little bio before we jump in. So Jeff was one of the co-founders of Buddy, Chief Revenue Officer, Chief Strategy Officer. So in August of last year, the company was sold for $800 million. And Jeff was an essential element of how that all happened. And of course, Salesforce, being smart, has made sure that Jeff sticks around for quite some time. So I think, and one of the reasons why I wanted Jeff to come and speak to you today and respond to some questions is the fact that he really was on the front lines of customer development, strategic planning, and taking a company from literally a PowerPoint deck to a company that was generating, tens of millions of dollars in SaaS revenues at the time of acquisition by Salesforce. I didn't even know this, that kind of 8 out of the 10 top global advertisers employ the Buddy Media social marketing suite. So when you think of the penetration that this startup had generated in a 5-year period, it's absolutely mind-boggling. They really created a segment, and when competition came in, they stepped on the gas even harder and really kept them at bay. And there have been a couple of other acquisitions in the field, but literally the Buddy exit was more than 2x the next best outcome. And then finally, Jeff was born and raised here. He blogs at jeffsweather.com, which is actually a pretty fun site. He hasn't done enough of it lately.
Yeah. If you want the weather forecast for like 2 years ago, go to Jeff's Weather.
But it's very cool. So again, thank you very much for being here,
My pleasure.
Jeff. So as we did in our talk with Beth Ferrer a month or so ago, you had a good predecessor. She's the COO of Fab, and so she kind of gave it's Fab. Kind of gave the operating perspective. So you having kind of strategy and sales and biz dev will provide another lens.
Great.
So we're going to start with some sales related questions. So you created a segment. In 2007, there were no companies like Buddy Media. How did you convince people that this was actually something that they absolutely had to have?
Yeah, so that's a great question because there absolutely was no vertical. So social had really, there was some advertising that was being done. Facebook was testing some, targeted ads with the universities. And essentially when they opened up their platform to everybody, like us, beyond the university level, we saw that as this major, major play. Back then, I think probably that summer, there was like 20 million people on Facebook, and we thought that was outstanding. We're like, this is such an incredible platform. There's 20 million people. This was like just in the beginning of when they opened up. And Mike, who was our CEO and co-founder as well, we would go to meetings. We're talking about meetings like HBO, like very, very cutting edge type companies that are willing to invest in solutions that, you don't know what's going to happen yet, right? There's no proven model. And they even were like, this is a little early, for us to think about, right? And this is in the early days. We had just started the company for a few months, and what we did 6 years later was very different from what we started with.
Sure.
So what we started with, and to answer your question, I kind of have to,
provide some context.
Provide context. But when we started the company, we actually started the business by creating a loyalty platform called AceBucks. I'm sure you remember those days. And essentially what AceBucks was you would play a game and you would earn an AceBuck, right? So the more games you played, the more AceBucks you'd earn. And then with those AceBucks, you can buy real product. So we were going to brands and we were saying, hey, we've got like 5 million users, right? Which today, of course, is like nothing. But we say, hey, we've got this great audience. They're really engaged. If you give us, promotional materials, we can do like a barter. So that's how it actually started. And then once we got a few big brands in there, like New Balance and Anheuser-Busch, we used that as kind of our foundation. And from there, we moved into what we call the advertising market. So we didn't create games back then. We licensed them, and we kind of added AceBucks as an API layer. And then the brand started seeing all the engagement. They said, hey, we want to create our own games and integrate AceBucks into those games. So it wasn't just about merchandise. It was we were now creating apps. So all of a sudden, this market opened up that we had no idea about. We had no idea. I mean, I was doing sales, I was a project manager. I mean, I was doing everything from doing the deal to actually fulfilling it. And I'm not a project manager by any means. So we saw this niche that all of a sudden opened up of custom app development for brands. And there really wasn't anyone out there that was doing it.
So how did you see yourself relative to like the Slides of the world?
Well, Slide wasn't building like fully customized solutions, right? They had their own apps that they were basically selling ad inventory in. Sure. What we were doing is we were actually creating an entire experience. So like New Balance, we created this running game. And you had to run through, there was like 20 levels and all sorts of crazy things coming at you like cats and bullets, and that wouldn't fly today, by the way. But we created this market that we didn't know much about, but all of a sudden there was a demand for it. And as Facebook became more popular and their growth doubled and tripled in just a very short period of time, we capitalized on that. So we actually created this segment called advertising, and brands reacted so strongly to it. So when you have a few very large brands like Anheuser-Busch, the Bud Light brands, when you've got SeaWorld, when you've got New Balance, when you've got Nike, you've got these big brands that are investing in an area that no one knows about, there's nothing to compare it to, right? And the only thing that we were seeing was success. So we were just showing, hey, look, this is where the market is going, right? This is a new vertical that you have to invest in. And if you don't invest in it now, it's going to be way too expensive to come in later. So, we did that for about a year, the advertising business. And from there, we actually realized that, one, it doesn't scale, right? It's a custom, think about it. You're creating a custom game every time for a brand. It doesn't scale. You can't recreate, you can't reuse the assets. You have to build it from scratch every single time. So we were like, okay, well, this is not going to be a profitable business for us. And then Facebook essentially launched Pages for brands. And from there, that's where our business really started. So we pivoted completely. We said no more custom work. And Mike, basically announced to the world that we had a content management system. And our chief product officer was like, "Are you going to tell me about? Was I supposed to build that? Because I didn't even know about it." So from there, that's where we really started the core of our business. But it really started from the custom world, right? A scalable it wasn't a scalable model, but then we turned it into a model that was going to scale for a lot of brands. And from there, it's just the momentum of Facebook. And with our brand, it came out of nowhere. Like, we took advantage of that. There were a couple companies that came up and said, hey, we're very much like a Me Too company. We had to deal with competition, and they had cheaper prices than us. But one of the things that we really focused very, very hard on was our relationships with the brands. So, and as you guys can see even today with the announcement of video for Instagram, social is constantly changing, especially Facebook. Facebook changes their platform every Tuesday. So for developers that are building on that platform, they have to be really fast to be able to respond to the updates with the APIs, because it breaks things, sure, right? So that was our business for many years, where we have to constantly change the product. We have to be really nimble. We have to be able to build something where we had no idea about the day before. And brands really reacted towards that. They're like, I need a partner that's going to be able to change and adapt. And the bigger companies couldn't do that. They didn't even know what social was. So that was a big advantage for us.
And Jeff, something that a lot of our companies try and do is sell to the enterprise very early in the game. Mm-hmm. Do you have some specific advice and insights into how a little company can engage an enterprise and convince them to take a chance?
Yeah. So we all want the enterprise, right? We want those big deals, right? We want to be able to bring in like millions of dollars. But the reality is we have to prove the model, right? And we have to be able to hang our hat that it works. So I would say a really good example of what we did was with Unilever. We started off with one program for them for Dove, which was based out of the UK. And we had launched a global platform for them. It was the first brand that we worked with to do this like global IP redirect. So when you come to their page, if you're in London, you get the version for the UK. If you come in from the US, right, you get the version for the US. If you come in from South America, so on and so forth, and it did it automatically. Okay, and that was an area that Facebook didn't they didn't have any technology for, right? There was a huge issue. Well, what if we have a fan coming in from different regions, and they're coming into the same page and it's in English? So people were creating all these different pages. So for one brand, there would be 50 pages. And people were confused. They're like, well, what's the main identity? So we created this solution literally for Unilever. Like we built it, we invested. We knew that obviously Unilever was it's a big whale, right? So we invested pretty heavily in that product, and that is, again, it was kind of like our second tier. First, we built out this content management platform for Facebook and Twitter, and at the time, MySpace, which didn't do very well for us. But the second big component was the global add-on. And that's how we got into the enterprise. Like that was our first really big enterprise deal. And they invested in us knowing that there's going to be some hiccups. Like it wasn't perfect. We were learning as we were building it. And we were perfecting it as we were building it so that we can roll it out to everybody else. But I would say the one thing that you really need to focus on if you're going to think about scale and enterprise is how do you build one product that all your clients could take advantage of so that when you make an update, that update goes to all of them.
So when you didn't have that many clients, when Unilever was kind of this beachhead into the enterprise, how did you convince yourself that what you were doing was replicable and not only for Unilever and consuming all of these scarce resources?
Well, that's what actually came into the formula, right? It wasn't just, hey, we're doing this for Unilever, even though we're doing this because we can roll this out to every major brand that has the same issue with global identity. So you have to put everything on the table and say, okay, I'm going to spend all this time and all this energy and all these resources from a technology perspective. Is this going to be a one fit? Or am I going to be able to roll this out to everybody else? Because and this is where we really learned, and we learned the hard way, if you're going to be building custom things for everyone, you're going to have to constantly update those custom builds that you do for everyone. And at the time when you really need to scale, you won't scale. Because you'll be stuck doing all these little projects for everybody else, which at the time seems like a good idea because you're getting a deal, right? Oh, we got this deal with X company, and we have this deal with this company, and they want this feature and functionality, and they want that. You can't build it all. It's one way that you'll fall flat on your face. And that happened to us. And at one point, in the cycle, we were doing so many custom programs, and it was killing us. We just didn't have the bandwidth. We didn't have the capacity. We didn't have the people. So like these projects were taking a really long time. We're like, hey, what's going on with this? Oh, well, we have all of our resources doing this custom component, right? Because the client wants it. And if the client, here's a good example, Paramount. When you're a company that's just starting out, Paramount's a huge, wow, what an amazing company. They've got the greatest movies. We want to use the Paramount name. We want to break into entertainment. So we're going to do what we have to do to get that deal. It broke us. Our team was working on Christmas. It was the most demanding program that we were doing, and it was one of the worst movies of all time. So in the end, it actually wound up. It didn't help us at all. We actually lost money on it. But you have to make those decisions early, and if you don't make those decisions early, you're going to get stuck in a hole, right? And then not only you're going to have a bad experience with the client, but you're going to have bad experience internally. And you don't want people to start talking about your company that you can't scale, you can't build, right? That's the last thing that you want. So you have to be really smart about the business that you take on. And when you're an early company, you want to bring revenue in, right? And at that time, when this business was starting to blossom, it's we wanted to bring in as many deals as we could, but we were still growing. We were still really lean. And that's if I could give anybody advice, it's okay, it might sound good at that moment, right, to get that deal, but you need to really think about, can I take this and turn it into multiple deals, right? So even think about from an architecture standpoint, you could build the skeleton of it and then do some custom solutions around it. But as long as you can actually create, repeatable plays, that's what it's all about.
So aside from kind of doing a lot of one-off dev,
Which we did, by the way. We did a lot of it in the beginning.
What are some of the other kind of common mistakes that early stage companies make in selling to the enterprise?
I would say pricing, right? So don't price yourselves out. So you see the big dollar signs, you're okay, we'll do it for so much cheaper, right? Just to get that logo and just to get that big enterprise deal, you're going to give it to them for nothing. But think about what happens when your business really starts to take off and you have all of these different pricing options for everybody. People get confused, and the brands, they talk, right? When you get large enough, they start talking to each other. Like, oh, you're paying that?
So you should assume that there's pretty much price transparency when you get to a certain scale.
Exactly. Now, if you're talking like massive scale to the enterprise, like of course you're going to discount, right? If you're going to be buying that much, you want to discount, but you want to think about what happens next year, like what happens in 2 years, what happens in 3 years. How do we grow this account? So think about if you are going to give a big break, right, to get into an enterprise. Think about, okay, we'll do this for a year, but then the second year, here's what the pricing is going to be, right? We're very blinded by that in the beginning, right? I was too. I'm like, no, we got to do this. Like, this is an amazing opportunity. If we don't get this, somebody else will, right? But you really, down the line, you need to think about that.
So one of the
by the way, we're even dealing with that today, right? With some of our large clients who we got in at a really low rate, and they've been moving very slowly. All the other clients who are buying the same amount as them are paying like triple the amount. Wow. So you got to. I mean, that was our fault. Like, we just have to be smarter about how we do these. So it's very good advice. If I can go back, if I could turn back time, as Cher would say, I would probably think about that a little smarter.
One of the things that I think plague a lot of early stage companies in selling to the enterprise is very long sales cycles, and the fact that, if you have early dependence on enterprise, then that can just kill you from a cash flow perspective. Like, so kind of, how did you deal with that with Mike and kind of
investors?
Finance? Yes. Who?
Yeah.
Yes. In dealing with that issue.
Yeah, so if we go back to when we were doing the custom builds, that's not a repeatable play, right? That's like a one-time fee. So that's not a good business model, right? In the beginning, if you're trying to get up and running a little bit, that might work, right? But if you're going to get paid 60, 90, 120 days later, and you've already built it, it puts you in a very difficult position, right? Because you need to get paid. If you think about a large enterprise deal and there's payment issues, like, hey, we don't pay, like there are some companies out there, they literally do not pay for 120 days. Or if you're doing a media program, they won't pay until it's fulfilled. That's another thing that we had a big problem with that, where we were doing a lot of media, another pivot that we did, right? We created an ad platform, which wasn't very successful. But people would buy media, and they wouldn't pay for it until it was filled. And it might be a 6-month campaign. So that's something that you really need to think about, especially from an internal revenue recognition standpoint. We didn't really know in the beginning. Like, that's, for all of us, that's not really our backgrounds. So again, if you can get some type of upfront payment, like in the beginning, if it's going to be a long process, that's advisable. If it's not, letting your CFO or letting your investors know, hey, we have this deal, but here are the terms. And sometimes there's just no way around it. Like, if you don't do that, you're not going to get the deal, right? I mean, that's the reality. Big companies, there's procurement, like process takes a long time. That's the one thing that I really loved being a startup, is that we did whatever we wanted to do. So in the beginning, we created the rules. Contract process, we didn't really have a lawyer. I would do it in the contracts. Like, it's not a good idea. The brands that we actually started with, they were like, how did you guys get these red lines done so fast? I'm like, oh, we have an amazing legal team.
Except all.
Except. Yeah. Except. Yeah. Not advisable, but you have to do what you have to do in the beginning to get to get past level 1, you got to be able to be flexible. We would never be able to do that today.
Sure.
Today, the contract process is like, okay, it's got to go down to Washington, D.C., Obama's got to put a stamp on it, then it's got to go over here, There's a lot of, it's a big company, and it's what you have to do today. But back then, as a startup, you got to be really nimble and you got to be flexible. And I think that's something that you really need to surface to your investors, like, hey, we're carving out a new space. We have to have a little bit of flexibility here. And I think that's what also gave us that forward momentum, right, is that we were really flexible. Yeah, sure. And that was just the beginning, like the first year.
How did you, in those early days, kind of qualify leads and kind of prioritize pipeline?
Well, we were small. So, from a sales perspective, I was not only running sales, but I was also doing deals. And I think that's one thing that a lot of people, especially that are coming from, let's just say, an enterprise that are going into a startup and trying to start companies, they don't realize you've got to be a player coach. That's so important. And there's not a lot of player coaches out there. It's so hard to find that right person, but you got to be able to do deals. You got to be able to inspire people who are selling as well and go with them and not do it as you don't want to be almost like competitive with your own team. Like you want to inspire them to do two deals, but at the same time, you've got to carry a bag, right? And that's one of the things that I love doing. Like I loved working with the team, but I love doing deals myself. I love being out there, and that kept my mind really fresh on our product, the industry, what people are saying. It wasn't like we're going internally to all these different levels saying, oh, well, here's my forecast. And, my forecast discussion was everybody in a room who is at client services and sales and said, what do we have going on this week? And if you didn't talk about anything going on that week, everybody around you was like, what's this guy doing here? Like, we need people who are 100%, working hard, and everybody is like here. There is nobody down here. And if they're down here, you got to get rid of them, right? So the player coach mentality is so important, and we're missing a lot of that today in the enterprise world. I see it everywhere. There's 17 layers. It's like an onion, right? You keep peeling it. Like, who's touching this deal? Like 30 people, right? You know what's going to happen with the deal if you're involved in the deal, right? So I'd say that's like a huge, that's really big. And for a long time, it's hard to find those people. Like we struggled with that. We work with recruiters. We use social networks. We talk to our friends. And at the end of the day, there's not a lot out there, right? You need to have someone that's, personable, that can build relationships, that's transparent, and that, clients love. Like they want to do a deal with you because they like you. And I think that's one of the things about Buddy Media that kind of catapulted us very quickly is our clients became our friends. Like our clients, and even till this day, like we love our clients, and we want to take care of our clients, and we'll do anything for our clients. So if there's a product that we've got to fix for them or a support issue, like we're on top of it. And we work 24/7. Like we literally worked for 6 years, every night, every weekend. I mean, it was tough. It was tough. But of course it paid out in the long run. Probably got a few extra gray hairs, but that's so important. And you want everybody who's involved and everybody who's touching, like, just to be on. And I think one of the things that I see now that I kind of take for granted is that when somebody emails me, right, I respond immediately, like in a second. And when I hired people, they were the same way. And it was actually almost too much to ask for people to be like, I need you to respond like at 8 o'clock at night or on a Saturday. Like people need to enjoy their lives, right? But that's how I work. So I was trying to create like copies of myself, I guess, which was, it paid off, I guess. But at the same time, it's not fair, right, to other people unless they really see this as like, we're going to do this. And we're going to work hard, and we're going to work the weekends, and we're going to work nights. I don't see a lot of that today, right? But when you're part of something and you create a culture, internally and externally, you want to make it work. Like everybody wanted to make it work.
You created the perfect segue to the next series of questions,
Great.
which are around recruiting and culture. Thank you.
Great.
That was not coordinated at all. It was organic. So when you're hiring salespeople, what were some of the traits you were looking for?
That's a good question. I'd say hiring salespeople, it was the single hardest job requirement to fill, even today. Even on top of technology in New York, right? You see so many salespeople out there that are like that, hey, used car salesman, not that I have anything against used car salesmen, but you don't want that. You want to hire someone that is going to give off the impression of who your brand is, right? So Buddy Media, we had this tagline, every brand needs a buddy, which is exactly what we wanted to accomplish out there. We're like, we are going to be there for you as the marketplace changes, as social changes, as all of this, everything is constantly evolving. We're going to be there for you, so you don't have to worry about it, right? Because even the agency world, they couldn't keep up with it, right? They were just like, okay, here's the double click, whatever, what's the impressions and the click through rate, and it's like, okay, we're like way over here, right? So when we're hiring salespeople, we're looking for a couple of very key traits. Like I said before, personable, right? So you want to be able to have a conversation with someone. We were going back and forth with what do we want that person, like where do we want them from? Because since this was a new space, no one knew anything about social. Like that was the crazy thing. Like we created this space. So we're like, well, do we want people from the ad world? Do we want people from the publishing world? Do we want people who have not even been in technology? And we tested everything. And one of the things that was the one constant was every single salesperson that we hired that was amazing, it was personality. That was it. It wasn't technology, it wasn't experience, it wasn't where they came from, it was personality.
They could build relationships.
That's number one. And I think they're
passionate.
Passionate. And you hear this all the time, like, oh, we're looking for someone with an MBA and 10 years experience and worked for this company. Like, that's bullshit. Like, that's 100% bullshit. And I was willing to take a lot of bets on people that I was like, okay, I really feel a connection with this person. They're smart. They can pick this up really quickly. There was no market. There was no one had experience in this before. So we couldn't use that card of, well, we're looking with, for somebody with 3 or 4 years of social media experience. Like, there was none, right? So we took a lot of bets on people. Like, we hired someone from Luxury Link, which was, a company that, very similar to like Sherman's Travel. They were like, had auctions for, travel related, hotels, and, you go on and you say, okay, I'm willing to pay this much. And it was like eBay for travel, but luxury travel. And they were a client of mine for many years, and I met, all these great people over there, hired, a product guy. He wasn't even in sales. Great personality, awesome guy, he helped our business grow in the beginning. Like, we won a few huge deals out west, like Disney. So I think personality is so important, and you really want people to, you want to put them out there and say, yeah, this is someone who represents Buddy Media, right? So, again, this comes down to like business models. Like, if you have a mature business model that's been around for a long time, you're probably going to want to hire people who have the experience in that. If it's a sophisticated sell, you probably want someone who has experience in that. But if you're creating a new market, why not just hire really smart, fun people, right? And they'll learn. I was supposed to be a meteorologist. I went to school to be a weatherman, for real. So, and I went to Oswego State. So, all these people are, oh, I need to go to, Harvard or MIT to run a successful business. Like, it's not true. It's like who you are as a person. And if you have the passion and you really feel like you can make this work, you can make anything work. And we knew, like, even after the first year in business, like, I remember having a conversation with Cass, who was our other co-founder and COO, who kind of kept our entire company, like, wheels turning, injected the culture and everything, and we all believed in it. We're like, this is going to work. And from the beginning, she made me believe that it was going to work. And I'm like, of course it's going to work. And that's what everybody else felt. So, and it worked, right? So I think you got to really feel it, and you got to hire people that have that, like, that fire. It's like, okay, I'm going to join this team, and I'm going to put everything I have into it, and I'm going to make it work.
So let's talk a little bit about that culture issue, because I saw the company go from 3 to 300.
Yeah.
Okay. And obviously, business model, processes, physical location, things changed dramatically over that 5-year period.
Yeah.
You talk a little bit about how you guys managed that so effectively, because at least my memory as an investor, my experience was that the culture was as strong the day that you guys sold to Salesforce as it was the day that it was founded.
Yeah.
So how did that happen?
So, well, Cass, so for one thing, Cass is like the culture queen, right? So she, and she does this in her life outside of work, but she brought this into the company where we want to make work fun. Like, we want to work really hard, but we want to make work fun. So from when we were just, 5, 6, 7, 8 people, our first, that first December, actually there's probably 10 of us, we literally, picked out of a hat, or a bag. Everybody got somebody else's name. They got $100 from the company, and they had 3 hours to buy the perfect gift, and then we would meet up for lunch, and you'd have to exchange the gift, right? So it was like our first, like, foundation cultural, like, it was really fun. It was Christmas, we were exchanging gifts, we were having drinks, and then everybody got the rest of the day off. That kind of started something really amazing. Like, it was, and I remember that very first experience that we did it. It was just, we were small and it felt like a family. And then we did that spring, after we did our first, we got our Series A, we did a scavenger hunt. So literally at that point, there was probably 25 people in the company. And we did like an all-day, Buddy Media offices closed, full-scale scavenger hunt. So there was like 50 questions, and there was, 6 teams. And literally, you had the entire day to get as many questions as you can. It was like Brooklyn, New Jersey, Long Island. I mean, it was like everywhere. And you had to be really smart about where you went, because everything had a certain point value. Like one of them was deliver a pizza to Cass's aunt in some church or something, and it was just really, it was really fun. And then at the end of the day, we got together at like karaoke, and the winner was announced, and then we drank, and it was fun. And all of a sudden, that started creating this like very family-oriented culture, right? And while there was competition, right, it really united people together. Everybody who was on a team was from a different group. So you had sales, you had engineering, you had client services, you had HR. So people who normally don't work together were getting to know each other very well, right? Because they had to run around the entire city. And then we did, during the summer every year, we did our annual kickball game. So it was blue and white, right? And that was kind of like almost like color war, like if you ever went to camp. So we had scavenger hunts, we had kickball games, we had Christmas. We would do, we'd have pizza. We had, every Friday we'd order in lunch for everybody. It was a different place every Friday. So it was this like fun, like we worked really hard, but we did these really fun things.
It was totally work hard, play hard, but the play aspect was incredibly creative, incredibly engaging, and brought everybody together.
Yeah, so the culture was so important to the success of what we did as a company, because you got to have fun. Like, you're spending your entire day working with these people are kind of like your family, right? And if you think about your jobs today, and when you go into the office and you're engaging with other people, like if at the end of the day you're like, either this sucks, or I don't really like these people, or I don't hang out with them, it's going to create you're not going to be able to excel the way that you really need to, right? If everybody knows each other really well, and they like each other, and they could hang out with each other, and it's more than just work, like it's like your extended family, people have a much different attitude on work. They want to work longer. They want to hang out with people on the weekends. We do all sorts of like different, like I do a lot of fishing. So for years, like everybody comes fishing with me. Like I do it like literally once every month and a half. Like even today, like I still do it today with people from work. We go fishing. We love to fish. So we go fishing, right? And people who love to play tennis, or people who love to run or bike, like everyone starts learning about each other and what they really enjoy, and it makes work so much more fun. So I think culture is like, if you have a company now and there's no culture, like inject that culture today. Figure out what you can do. Do you have a budget to work with? If you don't have a budget, think of something creative, right? Go to the park. Play tag. But culture is so important, and that was people stayed at Buddy Media because of the culture. They loved it, right? And we were buddies. Like that was also our name. It's like, you're a buddy. We also scared everybody. So like there was a lot of scaring going on in the office, like people hiding under desks. That's a no-no today. Yeah. HR violations, but Cass hid under a desk in my office for an hour. I had come back from this business trip in Thailand. I'm like saying hello to everybody in the office, and Cass is literally, and there's a camera. We have a video. It's hilarious. Have you ever seen it?
No.
Cass posts it like every 2 months.
Oh, I got
She puts it on Facebook. She's like, remember this one? I'll send it to you. And I'm like, she's under my desk for like an hour, and I'm walking around saying hello to everybody, and I finally come in, and this girl that worked with us for many years, Abby, she's like, oh, I just got this deal, and I'm like, awesome, tell me about it. And I reach underneath my desk where I have my refrigerator to get a water, and Cass is under there, and she grabs my hand, and I scream. I probably almost had I think I did have a heart attack. But stuff like that, we did that all the time, and it was just fun. On everyone's anniversary, they got a bobblehead. So everybody had to take a picture, like professional picture with our photographer, and then that picture was sent in to get a custom bobblehead. So after 1 year at Buddy Media, everybody would get a bobblehead. So people really look forward to that after their 1 year anniversary. And not only would they get a bobblehead, but they would be scared to get they didn't know when they would get the bobblehead. It wasn't on the exact day. It was sometime that week or 2 weeks, and they would, HR or somebody would scare them and say, happy anniversary, happy anniversary, happy anniversary, happy. Yeah, it was fun.
This was all very good stuff.
Yeah, but culture, it's so important.
So, Jeff, what were some of the? I'm just going to ask a couple more questions, and I'd like everybody else to ask questions.
Yeah.
What are some of the mistakes you guys made in the early days?
A lot of them. I made a lot of mistakes. We obviously, one of the things that we made a mistake on was our business model. So from the beginning, we probably pivoted 1, 2, 3, 4 times, 4 pivots, completely changed our business. And I think looking back at it, we were really smart to pivot, and that was cast saying, it's not gonna work. And you have to really, in your gut, know, you gotta move the ship really fast, right? So if you're going on this course and it's not working, you gotta move it. And a lot of companies are really scared to make that move, like, oh, well, but if it's not working, it's not working, right? You have nothing to lose. I believe that's what we did well, but we did make the mistakes of figuring out what our business was. And that's just trial and error. It's just as if you're fishing or you're doing something and you're not doing it right, you're gonna learn and perfect that, right? We made some hiring mistakes, big time. Some really big hiring mistakes. And that was because we were growing so fast and we wanted to scale and we wanted to build our teams, and we probably could have done a little more investigating with some of the people that we hired. I think every company deals with that. It's you'll learn over time, oh, this is not gonna be a good fit, right? And you could figure out what those red flags are from the beginning. There was a few hires that we had that there actually weren't any red flags, but if we had done a little more investigating, we probably would have found some more things. I had hired a few people that I thought were great, and I was out in the market and talking to people, and hey, just hire it, and it's like, you hired who? Are you serious? Well, let me tell you about this guy, So it's like, well, what do you do at that point? You can't fire somebody, right? You have to give them a chance. Eventually, it didn't work out, but those are big mistakes because you're training people, you're investing in them, and then once they leave, it's like you're giving them all the knowledge to go somewhere else, which is fine because they weren't very good in the first place. So it's like, take them. But I think hiring, it's like, you gotta be so smart, right? Because the cost of the wrong hire it's really expensive. It's really expensive. Not just from a morale perspective, but just from trying to get back to that point, right? So I think we made some mistakes on hiring. I think we made a couple of very big mistakes on geography. So we obviously were based in New York and we wanted to expand. We had all this business in LA and Seattle, and we're like, okay, we have to be there. And Mike and I were traveling literally nonstop. We were on a plane. And even till this day, I'm still on a plane, 24/7. And we made I would say we probably made too quick of a decision to say, all right, great, we've got to get people in LA and San Francisco. Didn't work. It just didn't work. And when you're a company when you're small and you're kind of coming up with different solutions and you're not big yet, it's too difficult to have people who are isolated living on these separate islands because we're moving and we're changing so fast, and half of the things that we're learning is in the office, just talking to people or just hearing what's going on because you're in a small space.
It's just a matter of culture.
Culture. So when we actually expanded out to the West Coast, we lost the culture over there. They didn't know, they came into New York, it wasn't the same. They didn't really get the feeling of Buddy Media, and they couldn't keep up. They couldn't keep up with all of the changes that were happening with Facebook and Twitter and MySpace and LinkedIn. It's just too fast. It's hard enough to keep up in the office in New York, let alone other locations. And I think one of the things that I got a lot of feedback on was, yeah, it's like you hired us and we don't know what's going on and you're not updating us. We didn't have the time. We just didn't. We were just going full steam ahead, and we really needed people to inject themselves into, okay, I'm going to call this person for this, and I'm going to, listen in on, a conference call. But it was so early that we just, that was a big mistake that we made. And then we were very, very shy about hiring additional people in remote locations, which was smart because we failed a few times. We failed first, and we tried it again, and we failed again, and then we tried it, and we're like, okay, this is not working. And then our first real location outside of New York was London. And what we did, this is what we learned, was we took like our best person in New York, and we gave her an amazing opportunity. We said, look, it's up to you. We want to open an office in London. We want you to do it. She knew the culture. She knew the business. She was really sharp. And she said yes. And that was the seed, right, for London. That kind of opened up our office there. And that flowered into like an amazing hub. Today, there's, when we sold the company, there's probably around 65 people in London. And then we did the same thing for San Francisco. We took somebody who we had from day one, who was Abby,
Right.
and we transplanted her in San Francisco, gave her an amazing opportunity, and then that created the culture there. So we learned we can't hire people from like all these places and just say, okay, great, we have our people in the remote locations. We took our own people that had the culture, that knew the business, and we injected them elsewhere. And that's where we really won. But we did a lot of learning to get to that. So that's something to keep in your minds too. Learn from our mistakes. Yeah.
So I'm going to stop asking questions. I would love to see what you folks have on your mind.
Jeff, my question is about pricing. So in the early stages when you're trying to price your product, most of the time somebody says, how much is it? And you're like, okay, how much do you want to pay? And that's not a good way to go.
No. No.
So what's the right way to test it out without losing some of these early clients where you're
Yeah, we tested the market. We actually put together, once we had a product, it wasn't like our custom solutions, because custom solutions, you could come up with a million different prices. Well, it's going to be this for this, and creative, and build, and media. Once we actually had like a product that was like a SaaS model product that was monthly fees, we tested it out with a few clients in the beginning, and we actually, when we first launched the product, the pricing was $5K a month, right, for a Facebook page with like a landing tab and using our platform and content management to change the creative. That was really expensive back then. Even for today, for like a single brand to charge them $5K a month just to use our software. We tested the market because we were first to market. Everyone just assumed that's what it cost. And all of the other competitors that cropped up, they lowered their prices to try and take market share away, but we kept our prices the same. So that gave us a very big advantage because we already had about 15, 20 clients before the other competitors were out there. So we actually had these amazing, built out, beautiful pages that we could say, hey, this is what we did for this client. Here's the results we got, right? So I think pricing, like I came up with the pricing, but I don't think I did a really good job at it because it's really hard to try and figure out what you're going to price something that doesn't exist yet, right? So what I would say is, figure out, you obviously want to have some type of monthly fee, right? You want to have that was the biggest thing we learned is you got to have recurring revenue, right? So it's like you sign a deal, and then the next 12 months, it's like, great, that's going to continue to go on, and you'll add on, and as you bring on more clients, right, it's just recurring revenue instead of one-time fees, and then you coming in the next year, and you're like, crap, what do we do now about our revenue? How do we forecast this if they're just doing a one-time fee? So recurring models are amazing, right, and it gives you the path to what are we going to bring in the future, right, and kind of having an explanation to, your VC company. But you got to test different things. But you got to be smart about it in the beginning. Otherwise, again, like I said before, you'll be pigeonholed. You don't want to go in too low, right? Because if you go in too low, then you're going to be losing a lot of money, knowing that you can get more.
So did you go to a couple of your very best clients with the closest relationships, aired a little high relative to what you thought might be the clearing price,
here's the thing.
to know that you weren't going to screw up the client relationship and
Yeah.
they were going to give you real feedback?
Yeah, we would give them, we're like, okay, this is what it costs, but, and there was always a but, we're like, we can be a little more flexible based on terms, right? Based on creative, like, you know what, we will throw in creative for you for free. That was a big thing. We threw in creative, like everything we did, we threw in the creative. We're like, okay, great, you're gonna license this for 12 months, we'll do the creative for you. We'll make sure that the page gets up, we have our entire team. That was like that was amazing. Now, to big companies today, it's like, you're going to throw in creative at the end of the year, you're giving away $5 million worth of revenue. That's crazy. But we ensured the success of the clients. Like, not only were they buying it, but we had an account manager, right? We had a customer service person. It's like we were, like, from day one, we're like, okay, great, let's brainstorm, let's figure out what do you guys need, here are the assets, give us the assets, we'll have our designers come up with like a mock-up, right? So if you can add some type of value add on top of it to kind of sweeten the deal, brands love that, right? They love getting something for free. Hey, this is worth $20,000. We're going to give it to you because we want to invest in your relationship, which we did. We wanted them to come on this journey with us. We even said to them, look, this marketplace is changing so fast, and we want to be here for you. So we're going to throw in this, professional services of X. That helped a lot, and that kind of offset our high prices. Our competitors actually, they were, just nailing us, with all of our, the market that we were going after. They're like, oh, buddy media is so expensive, and we can offer you the same thing, right? But really wasn't the case. Like, they couldn't offer the same thing because they were offering just a solution. We were offering a solution and professional services around it. So it's like we were giving this great piece of technology, but we were actually helping them. It was basically helping them get the job done faster.
Sure.
Because if you go and buy something and you don't know how to use it, it's like you're wasting a lot of time.
Sorry, just a very quick follow-on on that. Your take on how transparent should you be on pricing? Is it wise to put it on the website so that everybody can see it, or?
That was one thing we never did. We didn't put the pricing on our website. We kept it very secret. When you're a full-scale enterprise and then you could put pricing out there, but I wouldn't recommend doing that in the beginning. Because then everybody else knows what your pricing is, and then they'll come in and say, oh, we'll give it to you for 20% less. So I wouldn't recommend that. But again, it depends on what your business model is. For us, that was like, no, we would never, yeah.
I guess Jason, then Alex.
I got a few. We'll just start with this one. Come back to me later. In that, sales cycle talking, we implemented a few things that we think have lowered that cycle and made our contracts smaller, lower, things like that. But if you could explain a couple of things, 2 or 3 tactics that really help reduce that cycle, love to hear.
Yeah. So, well, that's half the battle. So contracts that are not like 17 pages, right? Really clear and concise contracts. Do you have a legal team? Okay, but somebody who's doing the contracts, I think it's so important that the legal person, team, whoever it is, that they're working as hard as they can to expedite, right, the red line process. Because I've seen so many deals get held up from red lines going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and there's no flexibility. And really, at the end of the day, when you think about a legal contract, it's really to protect both parties, but most of the time, nothing is ever exercised on an issue. It's there to protect you, but if you could minimize that as much as possible and not get stuck in the weeds with the contract process, and again, I'm not saying what I did was right, accepting red lines, but if you can get that done quickly, right, with as little friction as possible, it's going to go much further. And having that legal person saying, look, this is a make or break, we need to move quickly. We had a lot of issues with outs. So in the beginning, it's we're look, we don't want to have any deal breakers. So we'll put a 30-day out in, right? We were really, really easy to put a 30-day out in. Today, it's not a smart decision, right? Because we want to ensure that the client is with us for a long time. Or if somebody says, hey, we want to exercise our 30-day out, it's if it's in the contract, they can do that. If you're a small company and you're just starting up and you have all of these strict terms 12 months, payment up front, all this stuff, you're not going to get the deal done. If you don't have a track record, you're not going to get the deal done. They're like, okay, we'll go to somebody else that has the flexibility. So in the beginning, if you add in the flexibility of having those outs, I would try and not have a 30-day out though. Do a 90-day out. Yeah, try and extend that. Be flexible, but at least 30-day out is really dangerous, right? Because that can dry up. If you have a lot of 30-day outs, it could dry up really fast. So if you're going to do a 90-day out, know that you should be supporting these people as much as possible so that they don't ever exercise their out, okay? if you can get away with not, doing contracts where it's like minimum of a year, like if you know you can do it, do it. But if there's, if you're up against a lot of competition and it's like very fierce, from like a contract process, like it's okay to be a little more flexible in the beginning. But just know that, okay, we're going to make sure this client's really happy so that they never actually have to exercise their out.
Alice?
Did any of your enterprise clients request or demand exclusivity, and how did you handle it?
Yes, they did. That's a really good question, because we had a lot.
Least favorite conversation.
We had a lot of issues with that. In the beginning, we had a lot of clients that wanted, 100% exclusivity. Not a good idea. And one of the things that we actually, discussed with them about, being exclusive is we're a business, and our product is what we're hanging our hat on, right? And this is how we're making money. So if we're just exclusive to you, we're losing X number of dollars of market share out there. So unless you guys want to pay, right, we're willing to do an exclusive deal with you, but you're gonna have to pay for it, right? We didn't actually ever do it. There was a few times that we were going down that path, and we were really weighing the options. We're like, look, we're willing to do that for you, but you're gonna have to pay this, because you have to cover yourself. Like, let's just say it's if it's like an Anheuser-Busch, like look at all the other liquor and beer companies that are out there that you're losing money on.
They'd have to pay you like $5 a year
Yeah,
or
yeah.
something like that.
So it's like if they want mutual exclusivity, great. You're gonna have to pay for it. So we actually never wound up doing it, because it was just, in the end, it would really box us out of growing.
And probably prohibitively expensive for that.
Exactly. So that's something you'd be like, hey, look, we're willing to talk to you about it, but it's gonna cost you this. So you have to really look at, okay, what does the market look like? What can we get from them? And are they willing to pay that premium for you? Because it's not, I would say most marketers out there, and not even just marketers, but even in the technology space, it's not fair to ask for mutual exclusivity, right? It's not. Like, it's not common practice, unless you're willing to pay a lot.
How did your thought process change how did your thought process change from the first pivot to the fourth pivot? Like, were you able to realize, like, oh, okay, these are horrible decisions, so we should switch what we're doing? Like, was that easier like the third and fourth time, or like the first?
No. Amazing question, because I'm actually going back to feeling of when we pivoted and like the day after. And for me personally, it was very hard, because you're out there, you're selling something, you're putting it in people's hands, they're using it, and then you make a pivot and it's like, okay, well, we're not going to support this anymore, and we're moving completely to this model, so you have to move to this model. And if they're happy with that model, there's friction right there. And then once you actually make the decision of, okay, we're pivoting and there's no new deals with our old model, right? Everything is the new model. Now, the new model hasn't been tested, right? So imagine you were selling this bottle of water, right, for a year. And then you pivot and say, oh no, we are only selling Coca-Cola now. So for all the people that are like healthy and trying to be fit and drink water, you're saying, hey, no, you're going to drink Coca-Cola now, whether you like it or not. Well, what if I don't know how to sell Coca-Cola, right? I only know how to sell like natural water, Poland Spring, the best place on the earth, right? It's hard. It's hard to get your brain in that mindset of, well, but I have 5 people who want to buy water now, and I can't sell the water. I have to sell Coca-Cola. So, like for me personally, it was hard. But probably from like the last pivot, I learned from all those other experiences, like it's going to be best in the long run, right? But in the beginning, I remember I was so upset. Like Cass and I even had a number of conversations. I'm like, we're walking away from $500,000 today, And the answer to that was, we're going to be losing money in the future if we keep this business up. So you got to make really tough decisions, and you got to stick with those decisions. And you got to have like the focus of moving forward, and you can't have the emotions of, oh, but I could have had this deal, right? It's like, okay, moving forward, and I'm going to go with this new model, right? But that was really hard. Like that was really hard. The first time was really hard. The second time was hard. The third time was easier, but Yeah, I know exactly where I was on those days that we changed those models, and exactly what was going on in my head those days too.
And how did you communicate that to the clients, to the agencies? You know, you were just telling them this was the greatest thing ever
Yeah.
the day before, right?
Well,
and then you got to tell them, you'll love this new thing we're doing.
Yeah, it was a challenge, but the one thing that was really easy for us was because the market was changing so fast. It was literally every month there was something new, like Facebook launched this API, Facebook launched this, Facebook's degrading this, Facebook's turning off apps, apps don't work. So there was so much noise in the marketplace because everything was changing so fast. It was actually helped us to our advantage because that's what we were able to tell our clients. Like, hey, look, this was working before, but there was, do you guys remember with Facebook, with apps, you get the red notifications in the bottom right? Like someone would send you a request or, you get, what was it, when you would trade people, trade friends, what was that app called? Does anybody remember? It was huge. It had like 20 million people. Trading friends? No, it was huge. No one remembers, see? Back then it was so big, it doesn't matter anymore. But Facebook, they were like, okay, we've got to tighten the strings in our algorithm because there's so much noise in the newsfeed, like all the Zynga games, like Farmville and this and poker, and people got so overwhelmed that Facebook learned, we have to turn this off, we're shutting this down. They built their entire ecosystem on the app developers. Like people were building apps on top of Facebook, they were making money, they were creating business models just like us. And Facebook kept on changing that and moving the dials back and forth because they were doing what was best for the platform. And they were really smart. They took advantage of the developers, and then the developers got angry, and then they got over it. So for us, it was very easy to tell the clients, like, well, look, this is what changed, right? When Facebook changed from, you can, like, if you went to a website, a brand page on Facebook, like if you went to the Dove page, you can actually have a default of the landing tab, right? You have all these great experiences. So the first time a user comes to that page, it's like, hey, this is new product, and here's a video. Well, Facebook turned that off like a year ago where they said you can't default landing pages anymore, and you have to go into the wall, right, where it's just like people talking. Brands were really upset about that because they were spending all this money in development of these custom pages, and they were driving tons of people there. So when people were going to the pages, they weren't seeing the experience. So we had to then explain that, like, well, landing tabs aren't so huge anymore. They're a little part of the mix, right? But all of this changes. So we got really good with explaining that to our clients. And, to be 100% frank, like, you've got to be able to communicate that when you're doing the deal also. Like, things are going to change, right? And we're going to be flexible and we're going to change with you, right? And that was one of the advantages of working with us, is that we were nimble. Okay, they changed this, we're going to move into something different. It's going to take us a couple months to build something new. But as long as we were communicating that from the beginning, right, the clients kind of expected it, right? Because it wasn't a secret. Like every single blog and every single digital site out there, from all Facebook to Inside Facebook to Social This, every day there was a new article, like, what is Facebook going to be coming out with next? So people were kind of, they kind of were expecting it. The platform wasn't stable all the time because we were making so many changes. Every Tuesday night, our dev team was working all night because they pushed new APIs or changed things and broke the platform. Every Tuesday. You don't want to talk to developers on Wednesday morning. They're not going to be happy. So we got used to that constant changing environment, which is crazy. But, you got to do what you got to do.
Okay, last question.
I was just wondering, through all your pivots, how did you realize, after your last pivot, that was the idea that you're going forward? And were a lot of those initial clients clients that had stuck with you in the past through previous projects?
Yeah. So we had clients that stuck with us from the very beginning, even today. They're still with us. The last pivot that we did was when we pivoted to building out this content management platform. We knew that was going to stick. It was content management for creative and content management for publishing. So it was the best of both worlds, right? Then we added Twitter and we added LinkedIn. So it was like, here is your platform that you're going to be able to update all your social networks. So even if one of the social networks changed dramatically, we still had the others to fall on. In the beginning, it was like all of our eggs were in the Facebook basket, like everything, which is really scary because our entire business was based on one platform. that was scary. And especially with all the changes that were happening and how they were going to be treating us, and that kept me up at night. I
Well,
got
and
to
you see
tell
what
you.
Twitter did, right?
Oh, yeah.
They totally clamped down on the ecosystem.
Oh yeah, majorly. So I think once we were at that threshold of like building this product out to everybody, and we knew that was going to stick. And even until today, we're still doing that. It's still the product when we last pivoted. So we knew that was going to work. And once once we were bringing in the deals, like we were doing millions of dollars a month, like from doing 100,000, 200,000, 300,000. Like every month, it was just like, what can we do this month? What can we do this month? Finally, when we like hit $1 million a month in revenue, like new revenue, we're like, yeah, we can do this, and we're doing it. And then when we hit like $2 million a month in revenue, we're like, this is awesome. Like people really want our product, right? And we stood behind it, and then we were bought, which obviously worked out really well. Yeah. So yeah, it's exciting. And we're still changing and building and developing new stuff and acquiring new companies, and now part of this massive company, which is very different, but at the same time has a lot of funding to do all sorts of interesting stuff. So, yeah.
One more quick one. Last.
Sure.
So traditional sales wisdom says first you perfect selling yourself and then you figure out channel partners. What's your take on it?
Channel partners as far as reselling?
Yeah, could be agencies, could be...
Yeah, that should come last, right? You really got to figure out your business first, because you don't want someone else going out there and selling it that has no idea what they're talking about, because that'll give you bad reputation, right? I think third party, there's a big business there for someone to resell it, but there's also a lot of time, a lot of energy, training, right? We didn't do that until probably our third or fourth year in. We did it probably in the last, the agencies were pivotal to our success, but it wasn't until 2 years ago, which was towards the end of, we sold a year ago, so it was a year before that. It was when the agencies were actually out selling it to their clients. But we needed to have a really stable platform for that, because that word gets out very quickly that if you don't have a good product.
Well, and you did a ton of education.
Tons.
A ton.
Buddy Media University, we launched that.
Oh
we
my
spent,
God.
we
All
spent,
things with Viviki and
Oh, yeah.
hundreds of people in the room
WPP.
again and again and again.
like we literally would have,
Yeah.
we said, hey, we're gonna do every week, bring your people in. So we would have a pact where like 100 people a week from the agencies that we would just train. We would train. We'd have parties. We'd have drinks. We injected our culture in that too. Like where we're like, people are like, when's the next Buddy Media party? But we needed the agencies to really stand behind our product and not just, hey, here's our technology, but here's our technology and they really like us. That was really big for us. But I would say wait. You want to do that when you know that you have a really good product and you've figured out all the bugs and you have the team to support it. Because the agencies are going to need a lot of support, a lot of hand-holding.
Jeff, thank you very much.
Thank
This
you.
is awesome.